What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to From The Bench Vols. I'm your host, Will Meadows, and welcome to our Wednesday edition of the show, where you guessed it, we had a lot of Tennessee football to talk about once again. Yesterday, on our surprise Tuesday edition of the show, we talked all about fall camp, some intel on fall camp, the good and the bad, but today we're going to focus on the strengths of this year's football team, what we've seen early on in the first week of fall camp, and where this team can really capitalize on having some good position groups. Obviously, we've had a very successful few months talking about position groups within this football team, but we've seen them on the field, even just a little bit, obviously, with it being fall camp. Let's talk about what position groups and what can Josh Heupel do to play to the strength of this football team. But before we get into any of that, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment, share it. I would greatly appreciate all of that. I appreciate you guys for joining me on this Wednesday morning, and let's get right into it all. So like I said, yesterday we kind of highlighted the good and the bad, but today I want to focus on the good and really the above average and really the highlights, I guess you'd say, the upper echelon of position groups within this football team. So yesterday we talked a lot about how good this defense has looked, and we're going to carry on with that. I think the best position group on this football team, and I've talked about it a little bit this summer, is the defensive backs. We've talked about the secondary as a whole, but I think the defensive backs this year, I think, one, they have a case to be made, and you can call me crazy. I know so many people won't agree with this, but I think you can make a case that Tennessee has one of the best defensive back rooms in the country this year. I know that sounds a little crazy the second it comes off my tongue. I'm not saying they have the best, but they are definitely up there with one of the best defensive back groups in the country. And I think that's from top to bottom. They've had some really good freshmen come in, some freshmen that they like what they're seeing. Maybe the guys that aren't going to play a ton this year, but they've got some depth at the position for the first time in what feels like a while, especially early on in this Josh Heupel era. Just, obviously a great defense last year, but it just hasn't felt like we've had a ton of depth at that defensive back position. But this year, man, Jermon McCoy is the best defensive back in football. Him and Leonard Moore of Notre Dame could kind of be 1A, 1B. We've seen great strides from Ricky Gibson, hoping for another great year from him, but even some improvement. Obviously, had some rough patches last year, but still, again, a very, very good corner. Could be one of the best corners in the SEC this year, in my opinion. Obviously, Boo Carter. Is he a DB? Is he a safety? He's the star in this defense. Plays everywhere. He counts as a defensive back on the depth chart. If you looked him up, he's a defensive back. Boo Carter's a defensive back, and he is a playmaker. He's a stud. We know what Boo Carter is. There's a reason Boo Carter being close to being kicked off the team with such big headlines in the country and also in this fan base because of how good Boo Carter is. Colton Hood, the transfer from Colorado, seems to be all what they wanted and then some. Just a guy who really looks the part. It looks like he's played the part early in fall camp and just looks like a versatile chess piece for that secondary. And then Jalen McMurray, another returner, a guy who played a lot last year, a transfer from Temple 2 years ago, just a veteran in that secondary. And that's another thing that Tennessee hasn't really had in these past few years. A couple years ago, I felt like they only really had one solid piece in that secondary when we had Hendon Hooker, and I felt like that was Theo Jackson. Some solid DBs and safeties within that time, but it felt like here's a better way to put it. I think Theo Jackson would be the only person from those teams that would play on this year's team and play real snaps. So if that kind of makes it sound better. And then I'll kind of count safeties within this group because, especially in the college football world, they definitely call safeties defensive backs. For the defensive back award, they had Malachi Starks and Jahdae Barron in it last year, who played a lot of safety. Obviously, Jahdae Barron's a DB mainly, but also played some safety. We're not here to talk about Texas's Jahdae Barron. But the safeties, man, obviously there's a little bit of question on one side of the safeties. Not a little bit of question, but it's some guys that are going to rotate. I think Idris Farouk is your guy. He looks the part. Looks like he has come along very much in the spring and also leading into this fall. I think Caleb Beasley has put on a lot of muscle since he got on campus as a redshirt sophomore this year, and I think he's going to be a very big part to this secondary. And then Andre Turrentine on the other side, a returning starter, a guy with a lot of experience, came in from Ohio State, a guy who is, again, just a consistent piece to this secondary. So I think that defensive back is your breadwinner this year. Last year, it was definitely defensive line. Omar Norman-Lott, Elijah Simmons, James Pierce Jr., all those guys. I mean, your D-line is what got after it last year. This year, I think where you put your money is that defensive back group, those safeties, I think that is your main part of this team, of what makes this team and this defense so special. Also, on the defense, I could talk about the defense all day, man. I know that's what a lot of people don't want to hear. I know a lot of people know how good this defense is, and they're curious to see how the offensive side of the football looks. But obviously, linebacker and defensive line, I'll kind of put those hand in hand, so I'm not sitting here talking about the defense for 15 minutes on end. But the defensive line group, man, it just looks like another group that's deep, another group who's going to have some guys maybe surprise you this year. There was guys last year who they were so deep that random games, guys were kind of just popping off. I mean, Oklahoma, for instance, Jason Jenkins was down on the depth chart. He forced a fumble, had multiple sacks that game. Like, Jason Jenkins played an incredible game over there in Norman. I think there's going to be a lot of guys on this roster and in that defensive line group this year who do the exact same thing. We have the former number one edge in the country this year, will be a sophomore this year, or maybe a redshirt freshman. I'm not too sure on that. It will be his second year in the system, and Jordan Ross may not be your starter at Leo, but he's going to play starter snaps. Jordan Ross is going to be a force to be reckoned with this year. I think Tyree West makes another big jump with his third year in the system. We know what Joshua Josephs can be. I think a guy like, Bryson Eason brings a lot of experience. Don Bailey, those guys bring a lot of experience, but I think a guy like Jackson Moy is your Omar Norman-Lott from last year. Just a guy at that defensive line position who, yes, can plug the run, but is such a talented pass rusher from that interior defensive line position. I think Jackson Moy is going to have a very big year this year, and I just think the defensive line as a whole is going to be so deep. Once again, I think they're going to rotate. They like what they see from some of these freshmen. Ethan Utley. These guys are going to rotate, and they are going to be dogs up front. That front seven, the second part of that front seven, these linebackers, we've heard great things about Jeremiah Thielander, heard great things about Arion Carter, was just put on the freak list by, I don't remember who the guy was, man. I apologize. It may have been somebody from ESPN. He's a freak, man, an athletic freak, was put on the freak list. Didn't even know such was a list. Sounds a little weird when you're talking about a guy being on the freak list, but Arion Carter, nationally recognized as a freak athlete, sideline to sideline. He's going to be your guy in that aspect of things. But Edwin Spillman, man, we talked about it yesterday. Edwin Spillman is going to play just as many snaps as those guys. They thought he was going to play a little bit last year as a redshirt freshman, has come on so much through the spring, through the fall. If Edwin Spillman can stay healthy, he will be the dark horse of this defense. I know a lot of people are starting to get familiar with the name, but more you guys need to learn it. Edwin Spillman is going to be your piece to this defense this year that takes it to the next level, and that's just my opinion. The defense, man, it's hard to say anything bad about it. I'm just being honest. That's in the title of yesterday's show was Buy Stock in the Vols defense, and that was for a reason. I genuinely think that it's going to be a better defense than last year, which is kind of crazy to say. Just because they were so good last year, but I think this year they're more complete, they're more experienced. I just think at every position you can't throw a dart and it end up being a bad guy. They're so deep at every position. Safety's a little thin, but I mean, just the defense as a whole, man, it looks very, very good, very promising. Now on the offensive side of the football, where have we heard good things about? It's not going to be what you guys want, which is quarterback and receiver. Not saying that that's bad. I'm not going to be the one that overreacts. Again, I talked yesterday. It's practice for a reason. The quarterbacks are going to start to find their rhythm with receivers, but the receivers have got to stay healthy. Such a thin position. I think it's the most thin position on the roster. Mike Matthews was back with an knee brace. Braylon Staley was sidelined with an injury. Chris Brazzell still is sidelined with his injury. They're all day-to-day, but man, it's like I said yesterday, Tennessee has a track record of important receivers being injured, and that's not good. Dante Thornton was hurt a lot last year. Squirrel White seemed like he always was battling injury. Brew McCoy battled his injury in his time here. Cedric Tillman, his last year at Tennessee, battled injury. Again, not trying to say that oh, somebody's going to be injured this year. I hope and pray for them, but also for the football team that doesn't happen. But just the receivers look like they need work. But we're not here to talk about negatives. We're here to talk about positives. My first positive, who I feel like just has really stood out in fall camp, is the tight end group, man. Miles Kitselman's coming back from his injury. Who knows when he will be back for the start of the season? Maybe not. I don't think it will be for the start of the season, but I don't think he's going to miss an extended period of time next season. But the freshman tight ends, man, if you've been following it a lot, if it's not just my podcast that you guys are watching, you've probably heard about it. The freshman tight ends look like a problem. Deshaun Brame looks like a matchup nightmare. Jack Van Dorselaer, you might know the name because he scored 3 touchdowns in the orange and white game. Now, granted, it's the orange and white game, but still, these guys don't act like freshmen. They don't carry themselves like freshmen. They don't talk like freshmen. They don't play like freshmen. They have the body of not a freshman, is all I'm going to say. And it's kind of one of those things that I'm very excited to see how they look in the 11-on-11 setting this Saturday at the scrimmage. Ready to see them put their hand in the dirt and go block somebody. Because tight end is it might be the biggest jump of position out of all. I mean, obviously, in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line, it's a big jump. But tight end, you're just asked to do so much more that is different when you play high school football to when you play in the SEC. In high school, you're probably just a matchup nightmare, and that's awesome, and it's needed, it's wanted in your recruitment. But then you get to the SEC, you're just a guy, and you're also asked to stick your hand in the dirt and go block somebody 5 yards down the field. Some of those guys don't have all the experience in the world with that, so that's why sometimes that's a big jump. I'm excited to see what that looks like this Saturday. Obviously, Ethan Davis, again, I think that he could definitely break out this year. A big guy, a great athlete. So we'll see about that. I think the tight end is your deepest group on the offensive side of the football. I think that, with the questions at receiver, you could see a lot of 12 personnel like you did last year where you run the ball a lot and you get those tight ends really involved throughout the offense. I think that's I know a lot of people don't want that 12 personnel. It kind of means not near as many deep plays. But I do think you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of ground and pound football, and a lot of getting the tight ends involved, which, if it works, then so be it. Do whatever you'd like. That tight end group looks very good, man, and the young guys look very established in this offense early. The running backs, again, we just talked about the ground and pound. I think the running backs are going to be just as good as they were last year. I'm not saying anybody's going to be as good. I shouldn't say running backs. I think the running game is going to be just as good as it was last year. You had Dylan Sampson, who, again, I don't think anybody's going to be as good as Dylan Sampson this year. Star Thomas, Deshaun Bishop, both named to the Doak Walker Award watch list preseason. But I think that three-headed monster man of Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, and Star Thomas, I think that run game is going to be just as good next year because I think this offensive line is going to be better than what it was last year. And I know that's a big question mark. I think it will. I think Lance Hurd is going to make a lot of improvement. I think David Sanders is going to be better than John Campbell was even as a freshman. I think Sam Pendleton, I think Wendell Moe are better than both guards that you had last year. Now, obviously, your best piece of the offensive line last year was your center, William Satterwhite, or whoever plays that center position is going to have a lot to fill. But I do believe that offensive line is going to be better this year than it was last year. And I've been saying that really all summer. And I know to a lot of people it's a big question mark. I think that offensive line is going to have it figured out this year, man. And they're going to need it with a new quarterback and new running backs to get this run game established. That offensive line is going to have to be good to get Jake Merklinger and or Joey Aguilar established into this offense. That offensive line is going to have to be good. But the running back room looks good, man. I think that all three of those guys, everybody wants to say is Star Thomas, the transfer, going to be your running back one because he's named to things like the Doak Walker Award watch list. He's the highest running back rated on EA College Football. So you begin to ask the question, I've had a lot of people ask me, is Star Thomas your running back one? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a 1A, 1B with Deshaun Bishop and Peyton Lewis, and then him as the running back 2. And that's not a knock on Star Thomas. I think all three of these guys are going to eat this year. And I think it's, again, another one of those finally, it's a deep group. We've had deep running back depth here for a while now, it feels like. Obviously with Jabari Small, Jalen Wright, and Dylan Sampson all in the same room. Last year, you had Dylan Sampson, Deshaun Bishop, and Peyton Lewis. It always feels like the Vols are three deep, but I think this year it's going to be a lot closer. Last year, you'd probably say it was 50, 25, 25 with Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, and obviously Dylan Sampson. I think it's going to be a lot closer to 33, 33, and 33 next year for the Vols, percentage-wise. I think that all three of these guys are going to be key pieces to that offense. And again, I already touched on it a little bit. I think this offensive line is going to be very, very good. I think that David Sanders was the number one offensive tackle in the country for a reason. I think he's going to be a very good freshman. Again, we talked about kind of the adjustment some guys face in the trenches coming from high school to a freshman. It's been reported that David Sanders has put on 30 to 35 pounds, a lot of muscle, a guy that just looks good in practice, man. He's been running with the one some. I think David Sanders is going to be a very, very good piece to this offensive line. Again, Lance Hurd talked about on media day that he didn't feel like he was playing half of good football that he could have. Dealt with injuries, dealt with just stuff in his life. Feels like he is at his – it's a night and day comparison of what it was last year. I think Lance Hurd is going to make a big jump. And again, I talked about Wendell Moe. I talked about Sam Pendleton. I think that offensive line is going to be very good. So that's a lot of information there quickly. I kind of got into a flow of things. Sorry if that was too fast, but I think that there's a lot of stuff right now we're seeing on social media, obviously with the Blur Gate. I know what you guys know what I'm talking about. Even though that was just Miles Kitzelman who was blurred out. There's a lot of stuff going on with that. We've seen some bad stuff with injuries, and I've seen a lot of clips of drop passes. But there's a lot of good that needs to be shined, a light shined, a lot of good needs to be magnified. I don't know what the word I'm looking for right there is. There's a lot of good that can be talked about, and I just wanted to get that out there. Again, I think that this defense is going to be lights out, man. I'm excited to see what all of that looks like, but again, a lot of good to be talked about within fall camp. This is the biggest week we have right here with fall camp. Football is so soon. What's the date? Let's see here. And my Apple Watch is dead, so that does me no good. It's the 5th. It's August 5th. So football will be here in no time. It will be in Atlanta, obviously, not in Neyland, unfortunately. But Tennessee football will be here in no time. I think that there's a lot of questions right now, no doubt. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But there's also a lot of good coming from this. And speaking of good, Boo Carter just played, Boo Carter was back, full pads, full participant in practice yesterday. So the good just keeps on stacking. Again, a lot of questions, but I think that they're going to be all right. There's going to be a lot of talk within the media and on social media about what's going good, what's going bad. It's practice for a reason. So, people are going to mess up in practice. If you've played sports, you know that that's the time to mess up. So just a lot going on in the media, but I wanted to shed some light on the good. That's what I was looking for, shed some light on the good. I'm so glad that I finally found that was going to bother me watching this back. Shed some light on the good. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this Wednesday edition. I greatly appreciate you guys for joining me. Again, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment, share it. Again, I appreciate you guys for joining me. I will see you guys on Friday, and go Vols.